all of that really points to more adoption, greater understanding of what crypto is by a broader level of people, and beyond just institutional on the retail side as well. And I think, that all those bode well for crypto prices going forward over the next 12 months or so.
We'll say that Bitcoin could touch somewhere around 150 this year, which if it does that, there's a moment in time, there's a psychological threshold where the retail FOMO kicks back in.
On this episode of Early Bird, what are the bull case and the bear case for investing in cryptocurrency in 2026? Joining us today on the podcast to discuss these topics are Chris Kline, co-founder and COO of Bitcoin IRA, and Charley Brady, Vice President of Investor Relations at BitFuFu. If you're an investor looking to stay on top of the latest market trends, then you're listening to the right podcast. This is Early Bird, and I'm your host, Stephen Lerner. Before we get to today's discussion, let me tell you how you can save time and beat the market through Early Bird, a free daily email newsletter featuring commentary about the latest trends in stocks, cryptocurrency, and equity crowdfunding. Early Bird is designed to help individual and non-professional investors stay on top of all of the critical investing trends. The newsletter is 100% free and is sent to your email box each weekday morning. Subscribe to Early Bird for free at www.earlybird.email. Once again, that's earlybird.email. And now, today's discussion. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Early Bird podcast. Today, we're talking about cryptocurrency investing in 2026, what to expect after 2020-25, a year where cryptocurrency prices started strong and then towards the end they dipped a lot. So what does that mean for cryptocurrency investors in 2026? I have a round table of experts who going to explain what that means. Chris, we're going to start with you. I want to talk about some of the big picture investing themes of the year for cryptocurrency. So Chris, what are the biggest crypto investing themes of 2026 that people should look out for?
I think probably number one on that list is happening right now on Capitol Hill. The Clarity Act went through the House, and then the government took a nice little vacation on a shutdown, and now it's sitting at the Senate. What is typical, you'll see pork and fat get tossed into these things. A lot of amendments and changes coming from the senators in committee. It's a little bit contentious. You saw Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, out there saying we'd rather have no bill than the bill as it is, the way that what they're doing with it. It's really become a battle of crypto and the banks happening real time. I think that we'll get over that hurdle, and if and when that bill passes and what it looks like, there's a large amount of institutional funds that are waiting on the sidelines for another wave of institutional adoption coming this way. Kevin O'Leary, I think, said it might even be up to $1 trillion. So probably first on my list right now is what's happening, at least domestically. And then I'm looking also internationally, the geopolitical tensions happening in the Middle East, Venezuela, now between the U.S. and the European Union, always with China and Russia and BRICS. You watched what happened with the Bitcoin prices went parabolic as the Iranian rial collapsed just a few weeks ago. So these are really just interesting key points of where you see that Bitcoin really matters, and it's a big piece of a discussion, both domestically and internationally. So I'm watching all of that unfold. We're also walking into a pretty large budget, a $1.5 trillion defense spending budget. The printers have been turned back on, so more fiat money is being pumped into the economy. It's not making headlines, but it's slowly coming to fruition. And they'll probably, once they start with 100 million, then all of a sudden, before you know, they're doing $500 million in purchases a month. And so all those things, I think, are going to have a general pressure, good and bad, on the Bitcoin price and keep it relative in the news for the next 5 to 6 months.
Yes, there's some great points. Regulatory maturity we're seeing now, the potential implementation of major U.S. legislation that could provide a roadmap for so-called compliant DeFi. So it could be a big year and something to keep an eye on if you're investing in cryptocurrency. Charley, love to hear from you. What are you thinking as the biggest themes we're going to expect in 2026 as it relates to investing in cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I would agree on the legislation front. That's certainly going to be a big one. But other than that, we've seen continued money flows going into crypto ETFs, Bitcoin ETFs, and other. That's expanded beyond just Bitcoin into other types of cryptocurrencies. So I think that's going to continue to pick up steam in 2026. Again, more tokenization of real world assets, right? So where you have companies now that are taking physical real world assets in the world today and tokenizing them, putting them on the blockchain to where they become almost like a virtual asset that is backed by a real world asset. So, that's getting a little bit more traction. I think it's early days on that right now, but that could drive additional strength into the overall crypto market. And I think, stable coins as well, those are which are backed by primarily U.S. Treasury securities, but those are pegged to exactly $1 per stable coin. We're seeing more and more adoption of that by large institutions, and I think all of that really points to more adoption, greater understanding of what crypto is by a broader level of people, and beyond just institutional on the retail side as well. And I think that all those bode well for crypto prices going forward over the next 12 months or so.
Yeah, it's setting up real nice for 2026. To your point, tokenization was a big topic last year, and it still is here in 2026 as there's been a big migration of traditional assets moving onto public blockchains. We just saw the New York Stock Exchange a few days ago release their own platform, or at least announce that they're going to have a platform where you can purchase tokenized securities. And to your other point as well, ETFs are big for both retail investors and institutions who are beginning to integrate cryptocurrency more into their treasuries and settlement systems as we speak. So a lot is happening. 2025, I like to say, even though the year ended on a sour note with crypto prices, you could say in 2025, crypto got a seat at the investment table in a big way in 2025 as it became more mainstream. It sets up potentially nice for 2025. That goes on to our next topic today. I want to talk about the bull case for crypto investments in 2026. What does that look like? Well, we're going to start with you, Charley. What is the bull case for crypto investments in 2026? Why could prices for cryptocurrencies rise this year?
Yeah, and I think that ties into some of the topics we just mentioned on the what's going to drive 2026 in crypto space, and it really is that legislation that comes through. Legislation we already had signed, the current legislation going through Congress today. That right now you have a bit of unknowns, and I think greater clarity around policy and how crypto is going to be treated and looked at by the regulatory agencies. I think that's going to continue to be a positive regulatory environment. We're probably in the best regulatory environment in the U.S. right now that crypto's ever seen. And I think as we get greater clarity around exactly how these are going to be defined by policymakers and regulators, that's going to be positive for the overall crypto market overall. Again, I would also say, we're continuing to see more inflows into spot Bitcoin ETFs and other crypto ETFs. As that becomes more broad-based and more flows going into that's going to drive demand for those products as well. And I think, beyond that, just the overall macro, if we get into a continued stronger macro environment, we're probably going to get some, at least, one or two more rate decreases in the U.S. markets here. That's going to be, I think, positive for the overall crypto market, and particularly in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's certainly a macro tailwind in 2026, a pivot towards lower interest rates, certainly positive for cryptocurrency prices potentially. And to your other point, spot Bitcoin ETFs continue to grow in popularity. And as more people pile in money into those spot Bitcoin ETFs, that bodes well for most other crypto investments as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on that in 2026. Chris, we talked a bit about some of the positives going into 2026 and reasons to get excited about cryptocurrency. Well, what's your bull case for the year, Chris, in terms of cryptocurrency investing? What could a bull case look like in 2026?
Yeah, I think Charlie nailed it pretty well there with adding more liquidity to the market, opening up some of those gateways and getting that clarity around it. I also think that there's a potential for a super cycle shift. So for those that are listening that maybe don't understand the cycles, Bitcoin traditionally lives off a 4-year cycle after it's that involves a halving period. Every 4 years, we cut the reward in half for the producers of new blocks. We just had one 2 years ago in April of 2023. And you saw the run to a new all-time high late last year to $126,000 per Bitcoin. I think that what can drive us into a super cycle is that we're no longer living in a vacuum. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general are super relevant. They're critical. You see, the IBIT is the largest and most successful ETF ever, and growing every day, and more are coming. And now you have this financialization of cryptocurrency, not just adoption, but financialization with things like the ETFs, the way that stable coins are becoming competitive because of their rewards and the yield that people can get from them, the real world asset tokenization that Charlie was speaking of as a kind of one of the indicators. So we're no longer in this nerd vacuum, as I call it. For a last few cycles, we were really in our own little world, and it followed that. Now we're at the main stage, and there's a lot of things that the way we interrelate with other pieces of the economy that have a major factor for us. And that's where I think most bull proponents will say that Bitcoin could touch somewhere around 150 this year, which if it does that, there's a moment in time, there's a psychological threshold where the retail FOMO kicks back in. And we still have yet to see an alt season, even from what happened with Bitcoin last year. And a lot of folks are waiting in bated breath for which of these altcoins with their utility will have their day in the sun. So that's my kind of key takeaways for why we have a very bullish outlook for 2026.
Good points there. Chris, obviously the super cycle, every 4 years, Bitcoin tends to go through these cycles that produce some big numbers. And this could be that year. That's a reason a lot of bulls are excited about crypto prices, specifically Bitcoin prices this year. And to your other point as well, this is just sort of what's going on with crypto, where people are starting to invest more of these products, more for traditional investors. So lots of reasons to get excited and to experience euphoria in this cryptocurrency market in 2026. Of course, crypto prices, many of the mainstream cryptos were negative in 2025 as most prices in the space fell in the fourth quarter. So there's always that chance that crypto could have another bad year in 2026. So let's discuss that a little bit. Let's talk about the bear case. Chris, I'll start with you. The bear case for 2026, what does that look like for cryptocurrency?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm an optimist at heart. I bleed orange. I'm very passionate about what this can do to the world. You know, my goal is to help more Americans retire, and I think Bitcoin is a piece to that. I think it also has just so much ability to help do great things overall. But no, the realist in me will say, yeah, well, if we just have a traditional cycle, then this could be a relatively boring year. There's also that same macro enthusiasm can turn on us as well. And this is the uncertainty I think all investors and business owners, entrepreneurs are feeling right now, that we're not exactly like walking around with our head held high and confident. You know, we have concerns. Unemployment's out there, a risk of stagflation. That inflation is still a major problem, and it's putting pressure on not just households, but businesses and having to cut costs and all those types of things. And there could maybe be an economic event that could have a drastic pull down on all markets. And it's like, you know, if the tide goes out, my grandpa used to say, then you'll find out who's wearing pants. And so there could be something like that. That's where I would be looking for speed of recovery, just like, for example, March of 20, Bitcoin itself dropped almost to sub $7,000, $6,000 for a few days there, while the Dow was down to less than 18,000. As everything was tanking. And if you go and look forward, the 18 months after that, really, where was the recovery and the excitement was around the crypto space. But there could be a moment in time this year where, it may get a little scary if the economic data doesn't help us, and if we don't start making some changes at the Fed too. I think those cuts aren't just to give cheap money out there. I think they need to put the cuts out there in a lot of ways to help us pay our debt as a country, and to take a little bit of pressure off of rising costs.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. There certainly could be some type of event in 2026 that causes investments to tumble, particularly if there's some type of event that creates some type of flight to safety. And investors, we get out of crypto, they start going to safer or perceived safer investments out there. That could be a big issue, whether that's trade tensions or other geopolitical risk out there. Those are definitely worries that investors or cryptocurrency should keep an eye on. Charley, let's bring you into this topic as well. The bear case for 2026. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Chris said. Those are some of the biggest key points, I think, that he brought up there: economy, macro, things like that. One of the other things to be aware of is just in the crypto space. There are parts of it that are a little bit kind of like the Wild West, right? And if you look at 2025, there were a number of crypto thefts by state actors, and I think that you've got to be vigilant if you're getting involved in the crypto space as to how you secure your crypto personally. Obviously, I use a hard wallet. That's my recommendation for anybody. It's probably one of the safest ways to do it. It's offline. But if we were to have some major hacks that happened, that could scare some folks to stay away from it maybe a little bit. And I think besides that, if we had another regulatory shock, if say the legislation didn't go the way people think it's going to go, which I think is highly unlikely, but you never know until it's a done deal. And then outside the U.S., obviously, there's other regulatory policies that are happening that are not always in sync. And if some of those get delayed or pushed out, or maybe not as positive as some people are hoping, that could potentially put a damper on it. But again, I'm a pretty optimist and bullish on Bitcoin myself and crypto space in general. So I say these are potential bear cases, but quite frankly, I think the bull case is much more likely for it.
No, you're absolutely right, and great point there, talking about the legislation in Washington. If it doesn't pass for any reason, that would probably be a headwind for crypto this year, especially because so many people expect it to pass and provide some clarity into cryptocurrency, that if it didn't pass, that would be a perceived negative issue in the year. But you're right. Overall, it does seem like it's setting up for a good year, certainly the bull case. I do want to present one optional bear case to both of you, and that's with a lot of the spot Bitcoin and crypto ETFs out there. There are some concerns out there that we might find some type of ETF stagnation in the year, where inflows into ETFs come up short, they dry up, there are major redemptions, and that liquidity engine that we saw in the past 2 years in Bitcoin ETFs, it turns into a lot of selling. Is that any sort of fear that investors should keep an eye on this year? Or are we still more just focused on some of these other concerns that we brought up, that we're still more optimistic about the bull case? Where does that sort of fit into it?
I would have to say that's always a reality. It's something since January of 2024 was when ETFs really started to take off, and in 25 the adoption went nuts. That there's a chance that's an indicator, or if they do some other financial instrument with it and starts getting leveraged in some fashion, and then a bubble burst around that. That's always a risk that you can find too. I think Charley put it really well, is that not just the hacks and the thefts, but what happened with FTX and Alameda was the industry shooting itself in the foot, and losing that faith and goodwill of the retail buyer. So I think, that's always, you now have so much concentrated there that's a reality to watch for.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too, but I'd also point out that, in terms of crypto, and certainly in case of Bitcoin in particular, there's a finite number of Bitcoin. It's not like the U.S. dollar, where we can continue printing as much as we want to print, and it's that's where we get inflation from. And that the dollar today is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. The price of Bitcoin, it obviously fluctuates, but there's a finite set of Bitcoin in the market today. Obviously, it's being mined continuously, but at some point, there's a maximum number of Bitcoin that will be produced at some day, and it will stop producing Bitcoin because we'll have maxed out the production. And so that's a key differentiator, I think, in terms of if you're taking a long-term view on it, as far as why people look at it as not being an inflationary currency and kind of a hedge against the U.S. dollar and fiat currencies in general. And I think, are we going to see the same level of inflows into ETFs? Because it was such a rapid inflow at the beginning. That may slow, but I think overall we're going to see wider adoption. I mean, if this starts getting adopted by 401ks and people can put into their retirement accounts, at least maybe some portion of it, and it just gets wider adoption, I think that's going to continue to help the ETF side of it as well.
That's a good point, especially in retirement accounts, if accessibility becomes more of a reality. To wrap up the show, I want to sorry to put both of you on the spot, but I just have one final question here. And it's a real quick question. It's a prediction. What do you think Bitcoin's highest price will be in 2026? And what do you think Bitcoin's lowest price will be in 2026? Charley, I'll start with you.
High price, I'm going to go with 155.
Okay, 155.
And I think on the low side, we're pretty close to it. I'll hedge myself to say maybe it goes to 83 in the interim.
Okay, 83, cool. Chris, you'll wrap us up. What do you think will be the high for Bitcoin this year, and what do you think will be the low?
Charley put me in that Price is Right rules mentality right now. So 155 and $1. And then in the lows, I think he's very smart. The 83 is a good technical point. If there was maybe a little bit downward pressure around that, maybe 80 to 82. Cool. But that's the zone. And if 155 gets touched, it could be one of those, wow, we've all seen them, right? And it just it just won't stop. It's 5% here, 5% here, 5% here. If that happens, I would just add for the audience that I'd be watching specifically Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and some of the other leaders in the alt space to have banner years as well at some point.
Thank you again to Chris Kline and Charley Brady for sharing your insights on cryptocurrency. And thank you to everyone for listening to today's discussion. We'll be back next week for another episode of Early Bird. Have a great day.